First contact's burning light. Commander Natalia Rhodes stood at the observation deck of the Solarian Research Station, her silhouette stark against the fierce radiance of the binary star system. The facility's reinforced windows automatically adjusted their opacity as solar flares danced across the surface of the larger star. But Natalia barely noticed. After 5 years stationed at humanity's most advanced solar research facility, she had grown accustomed to the constant light show. The station's AI chimed softly. "Commander, unusual energy signatures detected in Sector 7. Profile suggests artificial origin." Natalia straightened, her attention immediately focused on the holographic display materializing before her. The readings were unlike anything she'd seen before. A ship, but one that seemed to bend light around itself, creating a bubble of darkness in the star's glare. "Launch observation drones," she ordered, already moving toward the command center. "And get Dr. Harrison up here immediately." The next few hours were a blur of activity as the station's crew tracked the mysterious vessel. Dr. James Harrison, the facility's lead xenophysicist, worked frantically to analyze the data streaming in from their sensors. "It's incredible," Harrison muttered, his fingers dancing across multiple holoscreens. "They've developed some form of photon absorption technology. The ship isn't just shielded from radiation. It's actively creating a field of darkness around itself." Before Natalia could respond, the station's communications array crackled to life. The message that came through was unlike any first contact scenario they had trained for. Beings of light. A voice resonated through the speakers, somehow managing to sound both ethereal and deeply troubled. "We are the Umbrans. Your star. It burns too bright. We request sanctuary in your shadow." The crew exchanged bewildered looks as Natalia activated the response channel. "This is Commander Natalia Rhodes of the Solarian Research Station. We welcome peaceful contact. Please identify your intentions and requirements." What followed was a revelation that would reshape humanity's understanding of their place in the cosmos. The Umbrans were a species that had evolved in the perpetual twilight of a dying star system. Their biology was fundamentally different from humanity's. Where humans had developed to harness solar radiation, the Umbrans were severely damaged by it. As the Umbran ship docked in one of the station's specially darkened bays, Natalia led a small delegation to meet their visitors. The sight that greeted them was haunting. The Umbrans were tall, graceful beings with iridescent skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their large, multifaceted eyes were protected by several translucent membranes, and they moved with an almost liquid grace. Their leader, who introduced himself as Ambassador Vexthor, regarded the humans with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Your kind walks freely in the burning light," he observed, his voice carrying notes of both admiration and horror. "Our legends speak of such beings, but we never thought to meet them." Over the following weeks, as the Umbrans established a permanent embassy within the darkened sections of the station, Natalia found herself increasingly drawn into their world. She learned of their vast underground cities, their mastery of darkness-based technologies, and their desperate search for new habitable worlds as their home star slowly faded to nothing. But beneath the diplomatic exchanges and cultural sharing, tension simmered. Some among the Umbran delegation viewed humanity's solar resistance with deep suspicion. Natalia caught whispers of concern about human expansion, about the threat posed by beings who could harness the very force that brought death to their people. The situation came to a head during a joint research initiative. Dr. Harrison had been working with Umbran scientists to develop new forms of radiation shielding, hoping to find a middle ground between their species' different needs. During one experiment, an equipment malfunction flooded the laboratory with intense UV radiation. While the humans present merely squinted against the glare, their Umbran colleagues collapsed in agony. In the chaos that followed, Natalia noticed something disturbing. Before the emergency systems activated, she caught a glimpse of Ambassador Vexthor not running for safety, but staring at the humans with an unsettling intensity, taking readings with a concealed device. As she helped evacuate the injured Umbrans, Natalia couldn't shake the feeling that this incident, though apparently accidental, had revealed something important. The gap between their species suddenly seemed vast and potentially unbridgeable. Yet, as she watched human and Umbran medical teams working together to treat the injured, she saw something else too: the possibility of cooperation, of finding strength in their differences. That night, as she recorded her log entry, Natalia chose her words carefully. First contact has been established with the Umbrans. While peaceful, initial interactions suggest fundamental biological and cultural differences that will require careful navigation. Recommend increased security protocols while maintaining diplomatic openness. The coming days will be crucial in determining whether our species can truly coexist in the same space, or if our very nature as beings of light will prove to be an insurmountable barrier. She didn't know it then, but those words would prove prophetic in ways she could never have imagined. Shadows of fear. The darkness in the Umbran embassy section of the station felt almost alive. Natalia moved carefully through the dimmed corridors, her eyes struggling to adjust after the brightness of the main facility. The accident in the laboratory 2 weeks ago had changed things. Where once there had been cautious optimism, now an undercurrent of suspicion flowed through every interaction between humans and Umbrans. Dr. Harrison fell into step beside her, his normally cheerful face drawn with concern. "Commander, you need to see this," he whispered, passing her a data tablet. "I've been analyzing the radiation readings from the incident. That surge wasn't random. The pattern suggests deliberate manipulation." Natalia's stomach tightened as she studied the graphs. "Someone wanted to see how we'd react to the light," she murmured. "But why?" Their conversation was interrupted by movement ahead. Ambassador Vexthor emerged from a side chamber, accompanied by several Umbran scientists. His iridescent skin seemed to ripple with barely contained energy. "Commander Rhodes," he greeted, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. "I trust you're finding our accommodations suitable." "Perfectly adequate, Ambassador," Natalia replied carefully. "Though I admit, I'm curious about the increased activity in your research wing." Something flickered across Vexthor's features. Surprise, perhaps, or concern. Merely standard analysis of solar radiation patterns. Nothing that would interest you. But as they passed each other in the corridor, Natalia caught a glimpse through the chamber door. The holographic displays showed something that made her blood run cold: detailed scans of human DNA, specifically the genes responsible for solar radiation resistance. Over the next few days, Natalia orchestrated a careful investigation. She assigned Lieutenant Marcus Reed, her best security officer, to monitor Umbran communications discreetly. What they uncovered was disturbing. "They're not just studying our radiation resistance," Marcus reported during a secure briefing. "They're trying to replicate it. I've intercepted transmissions to their homeworld. There's an entire research division dedicated to incorporating human genetic material into their own species." Dr. Harrison shook his head in disbelief. The biological incompatibilities would be enormous. Any attempt to splice human DNA into their genome could have catastrophic consequences. "Unless that's what they want," Natalia said quietly. The others turned to look at her. "Think about it. They're desperate. Their star is dying. They need somewhere to go, but most habitable worlds are bathed in sunlight they can't tolerate. What if some of them see this as their only option?" The situation deteriorated rapidly after that. Equipment began malfunctioning throughout the station, always in ways that exposed Umbran areas to increased radiation. Each incident was minor, but Natalia recognized the pattern. Someone was testing the limits of Umbran tolerance. Then Dr. Harrison disappeared. They found his lab ransacked, his research on human Umbran biological differences stolen. Security footage showed several shadowy figures entering his lab during the night cycle, but their identities were carefully concealed. Natalia was preparing to confront Ambassador Vexthor when a new player emerged. An Umbran scientist named Crixus requested a private meeting. Unlike most of his kind, he seemed almost comfortable in the brighter sections of the station. Not all of us support Vexthor's methods, Crixus explained, his voice barely above a whisper. There are factions among our people. Some believe we must adapt or die. Others, he hesitated. Others see humanity as an evolutionary advantage to be harvested. Dr. Harrison, Natalia asked sharply. Alive, but hidden. Vexthor plans to extract the secrets of solar resistance from him, whatever the cost. He believes he can force our evolution, make us like you. Crixus's skin rippled with distress. But such changes cannot be forced without devastating consequences. Before Natalia could respond, the station's lights flared blindingly bright. Alarms blared as radiation levels spiked throughout the facility. Through the observation windows, she could see massive solar flares erupting from the binary stars. Too many, too coordinated to be natural. It's begun, Crixus said grimly. Vexthor's followers have activated devices to amplify the star's radiation. They believe that by exposing themselves to controlled bursts of solar energy, while injected with modified human DNA, they can trigger rapid evolution. Natalia was already moving, barking orders into her comm unit. Full lockdown. Get everyone to radiation shelters immediately. She turned to Crixus. Will you help us stop this? The Umbran scientist straightened, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the emergency lights. There are more than two paths forward, he said. We don't need to choose between extinction and stealing another species' attributes. We need to find our own way. As they raced through the chaos-filled corridors, Natalia couldn't help but wonder if they were already too late. The station groaned under the assault of artificially enhanced solar flares, while somewhere in the darkness, desperate beings prepared to remake themselves, whatever the cost. The line between savior and destroyer, she realized, was as thin as the barrier between light and shadow, and they were all walking that line now, human and Umbran alike. Eclipse of trust. The solar research station shuddered as another enhanced flare battered its shields. In the emergency command center, Natalia and Crixus worked frantically to coordinate evacuation efforts while tracking Vexthor's movements through the facility's darkened sections. We've lost contact with levels 3 through 5. Lieutenant Reed reported, his face illuminated by the red emergency lighting. The radiation levels are off the charts. No sign of Dr. Harrison yet. Natalia studied the station's schematics, noting the pattern of system failures. They're hurting us, she realized, forcing everyone toward the central hub. She turned to Crixus. What's in the central hub that Vexthor wants? The Umbran scientist's skin rippled with anxiety. The quantum resonance chamber. It's the only facility capable of containing and focusing that much solar energy. If he succeeds in concentrating the enhanced radiation while introducing modified human DNA, he trailed off, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the horror of potential outcomes. How many of your people support him? Natalia asked. Perhaps a third of the embassy staff. The rest either oppose him or remain neutral. But those who follow him are fanatics. They believe this is the only way to save our species. A sudden explosion rocked the station. Through the reinforced windows, Natalia watched in horror as one of the solar collection arrays spun off into space, trailing debris and sparks. The station's AI reported multiple hull breaches and failing life support systems in the affected sectors. Commander, Lieutenant Reed called out, I'm picking up a transmission from Dr. Harrison's personal beacon. It's weak, but he's alive. Signals coming from the maintenance tunnels beneath the quantum chamber. Natalia made her decision. Marcus, get the remaining civilians to the escape pods. Crixus and I will find Harrison and stop Vexthor. She checked her radiation suit's integrity and grabbed a pulse rifle. We end this now. The maintenance tunnels were a maze of shadows and flickering emergency lights. Natalia and Crixus moved silently, following the faint signal from Harrison's beacon. The radiation levels grew steadily higher as they approached the quantum chamber's foundation. They found Dr. Harrison locked in a makeshift cell, weakened but alive. Commander, he croaked, they took my research. They're trying to merge human and Umbran DNA using concentrated solar radiation as a catalyst. But the process is fatally flawed. What do you mean? Crixus demanded. The genetic modifications they've created. They're unstable. Initial tests showed successful solar resistance, but the subjects began to mutate within hours. The cellular degradation is catastrophic. A slow clap echoed through the tunnel. Ambassador Vexthor stepped out of the shadows, flanked by several Umbran guards. His skin had an unnatural sheen, and his movements were jerky, spasmodic. Always so concerned with safety, with proper procedures, Vexthor sneered. While our people waste away in darkness, you preach patience and caution. He held up his arm, where patches of skin had begun to blister and crack, revealing an otherworldly glow beneath. We are becoming something new, something greater. You're becoming monsters, Crixus said softly. This isn't evolution, it's destruction. Better to die trying to reach the light than to fade away in darkness. Vexthor roared. He gestured to his guards. Take them to the chamber. They will witness our ascension. As they were marched through the tunnels, Natalia observed the other modified Umbrans closely. Their movements were increasingly erratic, their skin showing signs of the same degradation as their leaders. Whatever changes the stolen research had wrought, they were clearly losing control of the process. The quantum resonance chamber was a massive spherical room dominated by focusing arrays and radiation containment fields. Dozens of Umbrans were already there, many showing advanced stages of mutation. Some had developed translucent patches that pulsed with captured sunlight, while others writhed in obvious pain as their bodies rejected the forced changes. Behold the future of our species, Vexthor proclaimed, his voice distorted by his transformation. He activated the chamber's controls, and the focusing arrays hummed to life. Outside, the artificial solar flares began to intensify, channeling enormous amounts of energy into the facility. But Natalia had noticed something the mutating Umbrans hadn't. Crixus had been quietly manipulating his restraints, using his natural ability to bend light to mask his movements. She caught his eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. What happened next would be debated by both species for years to come. Crixus broke free, using his light-bending abilities to create moments of perfect darkness and blinding flash. In the confusion, Natalia and Harrison managed to reach the chamber's control systems. But Vexthor, driven mad by pain and transformation, had one final card to play. He initiated an overload sequence that would flood the entire station with lethal levels of modified radiation. If we cannot evolve, he screamed, his form now barely recognizable as Umbran, then none shall survive. The chamber erupted into chaos as humans and loyal Umbrans fought against Vexthor's mutated followers. Time was running out, and hard choices would have to be made. As alarms blared and systems began to fail, Natalia realized that the next few moments would determine not just their survival, but the future relationship between their species. Solar Forge. Time seemed to slow in the chaos of the quantum resonance chamber. Natalia's mind raced as she assessed their options, watching Vexthor's mutated form writhe at the chamber's controls. The radiation levels were climbing to lethal levels, and the station's eye was reporting cascade failures throughout the facility. The containment fields are collapsing. Dr. Harrison shouted over the alarms. If that radiation reaches the station's power core, the resulting explosion will destroy everything within 1,000 kilometers. Crixus moved to Natalia's side, his skin rippling with determination. There might be a way, he said urgently. Our light-bending technology. We could create a temporary void, a bubble of darkness to contain the radiation burst. But the power requirements would be enormous, Natalia countered, ducking as a burst of wild energy crackled overhead. We have power, Harrison interjected, his eyes lighting up with sudden understanding. The solar flares Vexthor created. If we could redirect that energy through the station's collection arrays. Natalia nodded sharply. Do it, Lieutenant Reed. She commanded into her comm unit. Get everyone to the evacuation pods. We'll buy you as much time as we can." Around them, the battle continued to rage. Some of Vex Thor's followers, seeing the horrific results of their transformation, had turned against him. Others, too far gone in their mutation, attacked anything that moved. The chamber had become a nightmare of shadows and burning light. Working together, Harrison and Crixus began rerouting power systems, while Natalia provided cover fire. The modified radiation had strange effects on the chamber structure, creating patches of warped space where light bent in impossible ways. "The void generator is online," Crixus reported, his fingers dancing across the controls. "But we need someone to manually activate the resonance sequencer. The timing has to be perfect." Natalia looked at the sequencer's location, directly in the path of the intensifying radiation. Even with a protective suit, whoever made that run would absorb a lethal dose. Before she could speak, Vex Thor's distorted voice rang out. "You cannot stop evolution." The mutated ambassador had somehow interfaced directly with the chamber systems, his transformed body pulsing with captured sunlight. "We will all ascend or die trying." The chamber's focusing arrays began to spin faster, channeling more and more energy. The air itself seemed to crackle with potential devastation. Then something remarkable happened. The surviving Umbrans, those who had rejected Vex Thor's forced evolution, stepped forward. Led by Crixus, they began to use their natural light-bending abilities in concert, creating layers of living shadow around the containment zone. "Commander," Crixus called out, strain evident in his voice, "we can hold back the radiation, but not for long. Someone has to reach the sequencer." Natalia made her decision. She checked her suit's integrity one last time and took a deep breath. "Harrison, be ready with those power reroutes." "On my mark." She began to move through the chamber, protected by the Umbran's shield of darkness. Each step brought her closer to the deadly radiation, her suit's sensors screaming warnings. The sequencer's controls glowed eerily in the chaos. Just as she reached the panel, Vex Thor made his final move. With a howl of rage, he released a pulse of pure solar energy. The Umbran's shadow shield wavered, and Natalia felt the radiation burn through her suit's outer layers. But she didn't stop. Her fingers flew across the sequencer's controls, entering the activation code. Around her, reality seemed to bend and twist as human technology and Umbran abilities combined to create something entirely new. "Now!" she screamed. Harrison slammed the power reroutes into place. The chamber filled with a light so intense it transcended brightness, becoming a kind of anti-light. Natalia felt herself falling as the void generator engaged, creating a perfect bubble of darkness that consumed the deadly radiation. When her vision cleared, Natalia found herself lying on the chamber floor. Her suit was in tatters, but somehow she was alive. The void had contained the radiation burst, and Vex Thor, where the ambassador had stood, there was only a faintly glowing crystal, all that remained of his transformed body. Crixus helped her to her feet, his own form wavering with exhaustion. "You walked into certain death to save us all," he said softly. "Just as the legend said, humans truly are beings who dance with the light." The station's AI reported that radiation levels were returning to normal. The artificial solar flares had dissipated, and the evacuation pods were safe. They had done it. But as Natalia looked around the chamber at the humans and Umbrans working together to tend the wounded and secure the facility, she realized they had achieved something even more important. In facing this crisis, they had forged a new understanding between their species. The hard work of rebuilding trust would take time, but they had proven that light and shadow could coexist, even strengthen each other. The real evolution, she thought, wasn't in forced genetic changes, but in learning to embrace their differences and find strength in unity. Dawn of Unity. 3 months after the quantum chamber incident, the Solarian Research Station hummed with renewed purpose. The facility had been rebuilt, but with significant modifications. Sections of the station now smoothly transitioned between light and shadow, allowing humans and Umbrans to work side by side in carefully calibrated environments. Natalia stood in the new diplomatic chamber, watching the arrival of the Umbran High Council through the station's observation windows. Her recovered injuries still ached sometimes, especially when solar activity peaked, but Dr. Harrison's innovative treatments had prevented any lasting radiation damage. Nervous? Crixus asked, appearing beside her. Since the crisis, he had been appointed as the new Umbran ambassador, helping to bridge the gap between their species. A little, Natalia admitted. What we're proposing today will change everything. The joint research project they were about to present had grown from the lessons learned during the crisis. Human scientists and Umbran light shapers had worked together to develop a revolutionary new technology, one that could protect the Umbrans from harmful radiation without requiring genetic modification. The High Council members entered the chamber, their iridescent forms adapting smoothly to the carefully balanced lighting. Dr. Harrison stood ready at the presentation controls, the prototype device humming softly beside him. Honorable Council members, Natalia began, the events of 3 months ago showed us both the dangers of forcing change and the incredible potential of working together. Today, we present a solution that honors both our people's unique attributes. Harrison activated the prototype. A field of shifting energy surrounded him, reminiscent of the Umbran's natural light-bending abilities, but enhanced by human solar radiation technology. We call it the Twilight Shield, he explained. It creates a personalized environment that automatically adapts to radiation levels, allowing Umbrans to safely traverse even the most light-intensive areas. The council members murmured with interest as Harrison demonstrated the device's capabilities. One of them, Elder Nixus, stepped forward to examine the shield more closely. "This could save our people," she said softly. "Our dying star has forced us to seek new homes, but most habitable worlds were too bright for us to colonize. With this technology, we can help you establish colonies on any suitable world," Natalia confirmed. "But more than that, we propose a true partnership between our species." Crixus took up the presentation, outlining their vision for the future. Joint colonies would be established, combining human solar harvesting technology with Umbran light-shaping abilities to create sustainable environments for both species. The Twilight Shield was just the beginning. As the council deliberated, Natalia's thoughts drifted to Vexthor and his followers. The crystal that remained of the former ambassador had been studied extensively, providing crucial insights into the interaction between human and Umbran biology. Their desperate actions, though misguided, had inadvertently paved the way for this moment. The council's decision was unanimous. The partnership was approved, along with funding for further research and development of the Twilight Shield technology. As the formal agreements were signed, Natalia felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Later, in the station's new arboretum, where plants grew in alternating patches of light and shadow, Natalia met with Crixus and Harrison to celebrate their success. "To think," Harrison mused, "all of this started because your people feared our relationship with the sun." Crixus's skin rippled with amusement. "And now we understand that what we feared could become our greatest ally. The same light that once threatened us will now guide us to new worlds." Natalia watched the binary stars through the arboretum's windows, their eternal dance of light and shadow reflecting the new partnership between their species. "Perhaps that's the real gift of evolution," she said thoughtfully. "Not the ability to change ourselves, but the wisdom to change our perspectives." A year later, as Natalia watched the first joint human Umbran colony ship depart the station, she reflected on how far they had come. The ship's hull gleamed with integrated Twilight Shield technology, a physical representation of what their species could achieve together. The experimental biological samples from the crisis had been secured in a specialized research facility, studied carefully to prevent any repeat of Vexthor's desperate gambit, but they had also yielded unexpected benefits, leading to breakthroughs in radiation medicine that would help both species. Standing beside her, Crixus observed the departing ship with his multifaceted eyes. "They called you gods for walking in the sun," he said quietly. But perhaps the truly divine act was reaching out to those who dwelled in shadow. Natalia smiled. Not gods, she corrected. Just people who learned to share our light. As the colony ship disappeared into the stellar horizon, Natalia felt a deep certainty that this was only the beginning. Humans and Umbrans would face new challenges, new mysteries, and new opportunities together. They had proven that the greatest evolution came not from changing what they were, but from embracing who they could become together. In the eternal dance of light and shadow, they had found their balance. And in that balance, both species would thrive among the stars.